Well, friends, it's once again time for In Other News. I think you know why I'm here today, because about 10 million people requested that I get on and rant for a little bit about the dear departure of dearest leader, Kim Jong-Il. Wow! This has been an insanely productive year for getting rid of really bad people on planet Earth. How bizarre is this? You know, it's winter break now. It's approaching the holidays. I should be taking time off, but current events will not allow it to happen. There has just been too much action, and now another dictator has bit the dust. That's right. Dear leader Kim Jong-Il of North Korea is now dear worm food, as I like to call him. And a whole lot of people are asking me to comment on it in terms of what does this mean for North Korea, for South Korea, for the whole region, and possibly the whole world. Of course, for my detractors out there, I'm not qualified to speak on all those things. And anybody who's going to try to predict what's going to go on in this part of the world, you know, anybody who's speaking with confidence that they know what's getting ready to happen is what we call a fool in the business, because that's what I wanted to rant about for a little bit here, is that nobody knows. Seriously. People in North Korea don't know what this means, and no one in the rest of the planet knows either. And that's why it's a particularly exceptionally unstable situation right now in North Korea. Again, not just for North Korea, but for the entire region and possibly planet Earth. Now, I actually think this is, when leaders die all over the place, especially dictators, we have this kind of gut reaction that, oh my gosh, wow, this is going to be a really titanic, big, changing, earth-shattering event. And oftentimes, I don't really think that's the case. I think Silvio Berlusconi departing Italy is of not that great a consequence, quite frankly. I didn't like the guy, but thank goodness he's gone. Muammar Gaddafi getting offed in Libya doesn't really change the equation too much there. It's still a country in some trouble with a long way ahead of it. Same thing with Hosni Mubarak in Egypt. However, having said that, I think this is possibly, I'm not even going to be so arrogant as to suggest that I truly believe that this is going to happen, but I think it's possible that the death of Kim Jong-il could become a gigantic, titanic event of the 21st century. Again, I'm a betting man, but it's 50-50, dead even odds on this. I ain't betting any money on anything, but I think it's possible this could be a really huge deal. It's equally possible that nothing comes of it. And what am I talking about? Well, he has had this hand-picked successor, I think it's his youngest son or his middle youngest son, who knows in that country. His successor, Kim Jong-Un, has been groomed now for almost exactly a year. I actually remember reporting on Kim Jong-Un, the Un-Kim, as I like to call him. I reported on him for the first time just over a year ago at the beginning of last fall semester, that he started getting titles. Titles like, I don't know, I'm just going to make up the titles. Like he's the chief of the military now. They put him in charge of that. And he's chief of the Communist Party in North Korea or whatever such nonsensical title. That's how they do it. They give titles to people to start building them up because they're going to be the successor. Well, they started doing that just over a year ago, and it does look like, hey, Kim Jong-un will step up to fill Big Daddy's shoes and become the new dictator on the block. That's entirely possible that actually nothing will come of Kim Jong-il's death, and that North Korea will continue to truck on for some time into oblivion of being a most bizarre state isolated from the rest of planet Earth and isolated from reality. That's entirely possible, that Junior fills the shoes of Daddy, and you know what? Daddy was Junior who filled the shoes of his daddy, and that nothing happens. I am not a big believer that that's going to happen, though. Again, I'm giving it 50-50 odds. But I'm thinking now that this particular transition of power could go very badly for the Kim family and for North Korea as a whole. I'm thinking every second that passes, we're getting closer to some gigantic, titanic breakdown of the North Korean state. I think it's more possible right this second than in the history of North Korea thus far. And I say the history of North Korea, that's only since the end of World War II, when North Korea and South Korea faced off in a war of control over the whole Korean peninsula, and that war went from 1950 to 1953. It has largely remained unresolved, which is why you have a North Korea and South Korea. For those of you that don't know, there's no difference between Korean people, period. There's Korean people, and that's it. There's Korean people, and there's Chinese people, and there's Japanese people, but Korean people are Korean people. There's no North Korean people and South Korean people. They are the Korean people, which have been divided by ideology since the end of World War II, when the commies from Russia and China helped the folks up in the north to create a state, and then the democratic capitalist forces, mostly the United States, helped the South Koreans form a state, and they've been kind of facing off ever since. Okay? So there's been this idea that the Korean Peninsula is going to be reunited someday. Everybody kind of assumes it's going to happen. Just how it's going to happen, nobody knows. I think it's closer to happening now than ever before. Period. However, it could happen very awesomely and easily, or it could happen in tremendous bloodshed, death, and destruction. And that's why this is a tremendously unpredictable and chaotic time right this second. Again, you're hearing me say chaos and chaotic, and you're like, really? I haven't heard anything going on. It's chaotic because no one knows what tomorrow is going to bring at this point, much less next year or the year after that. So again, to back up, it's entirely possible that Kim Jong-Un steps into Phil Daddy's shoes and they keep trucking along in their insane path to Nowheresville. But I actually just can't really see that happening, and I think you know what, I just thought of it, the phrase in my head. I think a Berlin Wall moment is upon us. And for those of you that don't know that reference, that's when the Berlin Wall came down back in 1989, and it was evident to everybody inside the system, the Soviet Union was kind of in disrepair and collapse, and everybody knew that the inside that the end was kind of near. People on the outside actually didn't know. And so at this particular juncture, when Mikhail Gorbachev was in charge of the Soviet Union, folks in East Germany and Poland and the Czech Republic, or what would come to the Czech Republic and other places, had been petitioning to pull out of the Soviet Union for years. There had been people who had protested for decades saying, hey, we don't like the Soviet Union, we don't want to be in the Soviet Union. And lo and behold, a transition of power that occurred in the Soviet era, this guy named Mikhail Gorbachev came in, and he understood what was happening. He understood that the Soviet Union was going broke, that they could not continue to hold on to power, and they certainly could not continue to control Eastern Europe by force. And so when he came into power, one of the things he did was he said, oh, okay, you Eastern Europeans, you East Germaners, and you Polish folks, and you Czechs want to be independent, fine. Go have a vote. If you want to be independent, become independent, we don't care. I think we might be looking at that exact Berlin Wall moment in North Korea right now. Because what happened when Gorbachev did this very simple thing of saying, hey, okay, we're going to let reality dictate things here. You want to have a vote? Go have a vote. And then suddenly, months later, the Berlin Wall is collapsing and Germany's reunifying and everybody's voting themselves the hell out of the Soviet bloc. That happened so fast, nobody could predict it. Gorbachev and his people from the inside could not have predicted how fast it was going to happen. And nobody, and I mean nobody outside of the Soviet bloc could have seen that the Soviet Union would collapse so fast as it did. Again, let me back up. That's what I think we're looking at in North Korea right now. It's entirely possible that this transition of power is not going to go smoothly, and that the Kim Jong-Un guy is either not going to be accepted by the military, or maybe he's got a brain in that fat head of his, and he might pull a Gorbachev and say, oh, North Korean people want to change? Okay, let's change. North Korean people want to reunite with South Korean people? Okay, let's do that. No one knows anything about this guy. It's totally unpredictable what he's going to do next. And we could be seeing a Berlin Wall moment. That because of the transition, an unpredictable nature of what's happening there, that any little crack in the door that this guy or his administration opens could spell the end of the whole Berlin Wall. The whole thing collapses, and we might see some sort of grand transition of the Korean Peninsula towards reunification. It's entirely possible. That's the nice option. That's the pleasant option. That's the, hey, everything works out nice in the end option, which is kind of what happened in Eastern Europe when the Soviet Union collapsed. That ain't the only option, though. And let me speak just momentarily about why, again, that lots of folks in this hood are extremely troubled. The United States is extremely troubled, too. But let me assure you that while we are on this side of the Pacific making fun of the death of Kim Jong-Il, and I'm as guilty as everybody else, the dude was a bastard. He was an idiot savant at best. At best, he was an idiot. At worst, he wasn't an idiot, and he was a cruel, callous person that helped prop up his own regime while millions of his own citizens have starved to death. So either way, I'm not a fan, and I'm not going to shed any tears over his demise. But we can sit on this side of the Pacific and make fun of the guy, be like, oh, what an idiot, and, you know, #1 drinker of Hennessy, and he was, you know, a total freak. I personally have called him the Michael Jackson of the Korean Peninsula, in that he's just completely out of touch with reality, living on his Neverland ranch. Unfortunately, his ranch is the state of North Korea. Isolated from public opinion, isolated from world opinion, disconnected from reality, and that's how he's run the state since 1994 when he took over from his dear daddy. We can make fun of that, and I have been making fun of that. Let me assure you of this. People in Japan are really worried right now. People in South Korea are exceptionally worried right now. And I know that the military of South Korea is on high alert. And I don't know much about military jargon in South Korea, but I've read from multiple news sources that high alert means they are ready for war now. There's no next step to war. This is high alert. We are prepared for anything to happen. And that's what I want you to think about with this whole unfolding story. Exceptional chaos in terms of what's happening next. Unpredictable, unsettling. People are troubled. The South Korean military on high alert. I'm assuming the Japanese military is probably close to high alert. Certainly the top leadership of both countries, and probably China too, although China would never, ever, ever be the target of an attack, so they don't have to worry as much. But you got to figure that the Chinese, the South Koreans, and the Japanese are all at the highest levels of power right this second, sitting around thinking out scenarios of, okay, what could happen next? If this, what will we do? If that, what will we do? If they attack, what will we do? If the military has a coup in North Korea, what will we do? How will we handle this diplomatically and militarily? Because that is the scenario that possibly may unfold to make this an exceptionally troubling development that Kim Jong-Il has died. Again, we on the other side of the planet who are out of missile range are like, Kim Jong-il, ding dong, the Jong is dead. This is funny. Let's all make fun of him. But it's a very serious news in places that can be attacked by these folks who are not the sanest people on planet Earth. Scenario 2 here is that Kim Jong-il, the idiot savant son of the idiot savant leader who just died, is not accepted as the next ruler of North Korea by the military. And that's what I want you to get here. The military of North Korea is the most powerful player in this psychotic state. And this is not widely kind of referenced, but you need to understand this. There are folks within the, there are elements within the military who are crazier than Kim Jong-il ever was. And are crazier than Kim Jong-Un is ever going to be. Meaning, there are folks in the North Korean military that are all about, let's just go nuke everybody. We should take the South Korea back by force. We should attack Japan. We should attack the United States. I mean, there are nutbags in the military. There's probably nutbags in every military of every country on planet Earth. But when it comes to the North Korean military, they're all at a level of nuttiness far beyond everybody else. That's the average guy. Then when you get the nuts in there, they're way over in left field. So there are elements of the North Korean military that have for years thought that they should go ahead and nuke and attack everybody they should and go ahead and pull the trigger and get it over with. What are they waiting for? Let's all hope that those folks are not the ones who are currently leading the hearts and mind of the North Korean military, the entity that actually does hold real power in North Korea. Because if those folks are leading the pack, they probably will not accept a North Korea led by Kim Jong-un. Why? Well, because the military has kind of allowed Kim Jong-il to be in charge all these years. And it's one thing, let me just give you the brief rundown of this bizarre communist monarchy that North Korea has. And by the way, it's the only such monarchy on planet Earth. No other state that's attempted communism or Marxism or whatever ism they claim to be has ever done it in a hereditary fashion. That is, father lets the communist state go down to son. Russia didn't do it. China didn't do it. Cuba didn't do it. Well, that's a tough one to call because Castro's still alive. But Only in North Korea was it a communist Marxist thing that became a monarchy. So Kim Jong-il, is that his name? Kim Jong-il? Kim Jong-il was the daddy, who was the leader of the country when it became independent, when it became a Marxist communist state, and he led it to its greatest peak, I don't know, back in the 70s, when it was still like pretending to be a successful country. And it industrialized and militarized, and with Soviet help, became an entity in its own right. Another thing people forget is that the North Koreans were pretty much winning the Korean War from 1950 to 1952 until about the early part of the Korean War. The North Koreans were winning until the United States and UN forces came in to push them back. So they had a state under this Kim Jong-il, and he is the grand great poobah founder, the kind of the George Washington of the country that ruled for a long time. People respected and beloved him because he actually did something. He actually held the state together and built it into something. He is beloved and treasured. And then he made it into a monarchy, perhaps his fatal flaw. When he died, he let power go to Kim Jong-il, the guy we're now revering as dead, and we're glad he's dead. And Kim Jong-il, by, again, any stretch of the imagination, is kind of an idiot savant or a very cruel guy, one or the other or both, who never really did anything. He was kind of handed power from daddy, who was somebody who did something. And that's why I'm suggesting this is a very tenuous time for this power transition, because it's one thing to have the leader and founder of the country pass power along to his son, and they have the whole state propaganda system prop him up and say, oh, well, he's the son of the great leader, and so yes, we have to accept him because he's the son of the man. That's one thing. It's a different thing to say, hey, an idiot savant is passing power to his new idiot savant son. This is much, much, much more unacceptable, I think, to elements of the military and perhaps a lot of the upper echelon of North Korean society. They may not let this pass. The other thing that the press is not really talking about, because they don't really think too deeply about these things, is that Kim Jong-il came to power in 1994 when he was, let me do my math, 50? Something to that effect, late 40s, 50, and no one in North Korea is in that great a health, so that's almost old age for a North Korean. Now he's passing power to a guy in his 20s that no one knows anything about. He's untested. He's never worked. Kim Jong-il has never worked a day in his life. He's probably the most obese person in North Korea. Well, by the way, because most of them are starving to death, which is kind of an insult in and of itself. And he's really young. Why would I keep stressing he's young? Because he's going to be there, if he's accepted as the leader, he will be there for a long, long Kim Jong-un long time. And I don't know that these military folks are really going to be that keen on propping up yet another idiot savant for another 20 to 50 years. Again, I don't have any conclusive proof that a coup is getting ready to happen. I'm saying it is more likely now than at any point in North Korean history. It is exceptionally unpredictable what will happen in the next coming hours, weeks, months, and years. This guy, this Kim Jong-un, is a nobody from nowhere. His only right to the throne is that his idiot savant dad, who drove the country into the ground, handed him the crown. And that might not be enough to keep him in power for the rest of his life. Does that make sense? So, I think a military coup is pending. I think that whether the hardliners in the North Korean military or the more moderate voices in the North Korean military, I don't think that anybody's probably that keen on this dude not being in power for the next 40 years. Because again, you also have to put it in the relative situation that North Korea is in. They suck. And I don't care how proud the North Korean military leaders are. They know their country sucks. They're not blind. So the transition that occurred from Kim Jong-il to Junior back in 1994, that was a much different North Korea. They've now spent another, decade and a half becoming more impoverished, more isolated, and more screwed on planet Earth. And they're simply not in a position, these military folks aren't, to allow this course to continue. For North Korea to continue down this path is folly for anybody that actually gives a rat's ass about the future of their own country. That's why it's unpredictable. That's why it's sketch. That's why crazy hardliners and maybe even moderate voices are probably plotting behind the scenes right now. And I think it's also entirely possible that a Berlin Wall moment is being reached, that big change may be in the works, because hardliners, the military hardliners will probably want this, to attack the world and have the world, nuke North Korea into non-existence, and they'd be happy with that. Believe it or not, hardliners would be considered more honorable to be completely destroyed as opposed to turn over a new leaf and have to be embraced and absorbed by South Korea. That's one option. Total death and destruction is one option by the hardliners if they assume power. If the moderates assume power, watch this prediction, and I'm going to throw this out as a prediction. If more moderate forces in the North Korean military end up in control of this situation, they're likely to use Kim Jong-Un as a scapegoat. And actually, that might be the best case scenario for North Korea right now. Scapegoat his ass, let him become leader for a few months, let him be the one to liberalize the North Korean economy or liberalize the North Korean political situation. Let him be the one that says, oh, by the way, I don't want this to be a monarchy. We're all communist here, so let's have a vote. Let's restructure our politics, much in the fashion of the Arab Spring. Let him do all that. Let him be the scapegoat so the military can retain their honor when the whole damn system comes crashing around them, if they allow that door to be cracked open just a little bit, because it's likely that the door will be kicked in. If they allow any change whatsoever, probably the whole door and the wall holding the door will collapse like the Berlin Wall, and change will become imminent and become quickly to a impoverished and extremely troubled and isolated North Korea. Booyah! How's that for a little analysis of the impacts of the death of Kim Jong-Il? One of the most bizarre leaders of the 21st century that nobody's crying any tears over here in the 21st, except for the millions of unfortunate, completely brainwashed citizens of North Korea, which you're going to see videos of this, by the way. Let me close with this. You're going to see videos. They're already starting to float out there of people mourning in the streets and people laying down in the streets of Pyongyang and crying, and there'll probably be mass suicides, or at least they'll be reported, and there'll be this huge outpouring of grief. Folks wonder if that's real. Oh, it's probably real. You have to remember, this society has no idea what's going on. Only like 1% of the entire country even has access to a computer, much less the internet, and information is tightly controlled. So they've spent, decades of building a propaganda story around Kim Jong-Un that he's basically God, and that, he's God sprung forth from the loin of his father, who was a God before him, and they don't know anything else. If you're only told a story since birth, and you're 30 or 40 or 50 or 100 years old, and you only have ever been told one story, that this guy is God, and he's saving you from the whole world, that's all you know. So there is genuine grief and bordering on insanity right now, and probably a majority of the North Korean population. Let's hope that change is coming and change is imminent to open up the doors so that these poor brainwashed folks can see what the reality of the situation is, and that change will come. And hopefully to come save their asses, because Kim Jong-Un ain't going to do it. And I'm not so much sure that a significant portion of the North Korean military is going to do it either. So again, we're hoping for more level heads to prevail. And that's all I've got for the analysis of the impacts of the death of Kim Jong-il. To summarize, extremely unpredictable. An extremely chaotic time for North Korean people, more so for South Korean people and Japanese people. And I do believe that a military coup is probably being hatched by multiple parties. We don't know who's going to end up on top of this, but I find it, personally, the last personal call I'll make, I find it hard to believe that Kim Jong-un is going to be in power anywhere near as long as Daddy. And Daddy was only in charge since 1994. I do not believe he's going to make it the distance. This society has been on the brink of collapse for a long time, and societies have a tendency to collapse during periods of transition. We're in one right now. We're going to follow this stuff closely, and I hope you learned a little bit more about the seriousness of the situation that's far more serious than the death of some jackass, some Hennessy drinking jackass who now is worm food.